Mr. Anup George Chaudhary, former Advocate General of Madhya Pradesh, Kailash Vasudev, and a senior advocate with the Supreme Court, Ghanshyam Tiwari for the Samajwadi Party, Geeta Luthra, also senior advocate with the Supreme Court, Air Vice Marshal Sunil Nadodkar, also joining us right now. I welcome all of you. Thank you to the show. Geeta ji, I will start with you. Ms. Luthra, if you just heard what we heard Mr. Engram say, and he did, with apologies to the panel, decide that he wasn't going to be part of a panel discussion on his own story. Is it surprising that the government of India, and I want to take a slightly different view on this, on one hand, we have just come out of 2 weeks of discussing national security, discussing Pakistan, discussing intelligence and all of the things we do to keep our country safe. And here we have the Ministry of Defense turning around and telling us that documents that were marked classified and secret, in fact too secret to be handed to Parliament, too secret to be handed to the open court, have been stolen from the MOD offices. This is a shocker. Do you find this difficult? How are we as a population to make sense of this?
You're absolutely right. It's alarming, it's shocking. And the court also observed and noted that why and what has been done about it if they discovered this on 8th February and we are almost a month away. So that aspect also has to be looked into. I find it very surprising that documents are missing, but I also think that it's not an argument to be made to court. The question we had to look at in court was, were the documents that were being given, were they genuine, or was there a question about their authenticity? And we have to go on from there, because as Mr. Bhushan said, the issue is too important for us to get into this aspect, whether the documents have been procured or lost, or have been procured rightly or have been procured wrongly. We have a much larger and more important issue, and that's what I think the court could look at and what the government should look at. I think we have to look at it in that perspective.
Well, so then here's the question, Ms. Luthra. Nobody in government has argued whether or not has called these documents fake, or argued the veracity of these documents, or said in any way that they're forgeries. Does this mean the government accepts that these documents are in fact the truth?
Clearly, that's what it clearly implies, because otherwise that's the first argument that would have been made. And I must say that, you know, although the Supreme Court has spoken with two voices at different times, whether documents procured wrongly should be allowed to be placed before the court or not, we moved a long way with the Right to Information Act, with the aspect that everything has to be transparent. We moved a long distance away, and now this aspect, if the documents help to uncover an important truth, then I think how the documents have been got, unless, you know, it's something which is completely heinous or completely off track, I think that's no longer an issue. And I think we have to address ourselves to the matter at hand on its merits.
Well, I want to open this up to
If at all the Supreme Court feels that they would want to go into the matter.
Yes, Ms. Luthra. I want to open this up to the rest of the panel at this point. And the question I'm asking is this: the government has argued two things today. One, that this is against national security, and the other one, that the journalists who have sourced this document and published it should be charged under the Official Secrets Act. Now, this brings my profession under a cloud completely about whether or not we can actually do our jobs. And I want the panel to weigh in on the arguments placed before the court by the AG. Does that make sense? Mr. Kailash Vasudev, do you agree in any way that The Official Secrets Act needs to be brought into play when a journalist publishes a secret or a classified document.
Good evening. In the previous past, whenever these events have taken place and there have been exposes of all sorts of corruption and charges against the government, as also the involvement of ministers, as also the involvement of secretaries and all sorts of situations, the Official Secrets Act has never been drawn in because the veracity of the documents and information given has not been questioned. At this point of time, the information which has been brought into the public domain, albeit from sources which are not disclosed, has not been denied. If the information is correct, the documents are authentic, the source becomes immaterial as far as journalism is concerned or as far as the law is concerned. As far back as 1987, the Supreme Court said, if the document can be led in evidence and its authenticity and veracity is not challenged, the source becomes irrelevant and immaterial. As of today, the problem is that we are all looking at a situation which has taken a very different direction. Different direction because the government has been accused of not being able to keep the whole situation in correct perspective. There has been a lot of political rancor on this. And in addition to that, the recent events of the last 10 days have also indicated the desperate and the dire need to have better aircraft. Keeping all this in mind, invoking the provisions of the Official Secrets Act would at this point of time not augur well for the future of either journalism or free reporting or the like. Free reporting is a right available under Article 19. There are a lot of press protections available. Yellow journalism is also protected. So therefore, to bring in the Official Secrets Act at a point of time when everything is a jumble would send out a very wrong message. Now coming down to what would happen if the Official Secrets Act comes in is, you'll have a prosecution, but you won't have the evidence to say who has done it. The disclosure of these methods, the disclosure of such documents are always surreptitious. They are done by covert operations because nobody is going to come forward and say, look, I'm in government, I release the documents. No one is going to say that. Only the journalist will have to say that, look, I got the documents. The source is my privilege and I'm protected by actions of my profession. So this is the two areas which will have to be balanced in this whole situation. Prosecution, I do not support. Investigation as to how it happened is necessary because these are national documents and documents of a classified nature. So someone will have to be found out as to how these documents were released. You can charge that man under the Official Secrets Act. Whether you can charge the journalist, I don't know. I have my doubts.
Well, I have this question for Air Vice Marshal Sunil Nanaotkar. What is your reaction to the fact that the Ministry of Defence, through the Attorney General in Supreme Court today, said documents of a classified secret nature were stolen from their offices?
Actually shocks me when the whole country is going through this debate for last so many months. And while on one hand, it may be a political debate leading to the actions taken, but I think this kind of document getting into open, in this fashion is, I think, very shocking. At the same time, this is not the first time this has happened. So I think over a period of time, the ministry from where these documents are coming out, I think they have not learned their lessons in the past and not plugged the holes that exist today in the system. And mind you, whatever, with due respect to Mr. Ram and his work that he is doing for public interest, and of course the matter is in court right now in the Apex Court. It's interesting what I just heard from the legal expert, and I think that is the key to the whole thing. That in 1 month that the ministry had and the government had, I think some kind of investigation that has gone into as to where these documents could have gone out, and if they are able to pinpoint, I think that Official Secret Act should be exercised on that person, because if it is from the Ministry of Defence, I think some heads must roll on this count. And on the other side, I think
Right.
we have to take all the precautions, because it is just not price. It is just not what is the, what is the base price, what is the total price of the contract, how it is, good, bad, ugly the contract is. Most important is that the modifications that have been done to specific to Indian Air Force requirements, I think if they've come out in open, I think we are giving away and its impact, because things are very live in everybody's mind. This aircraft, MiG-21 Bison locking, getting a lock onto F-16 aircraft and getting a shot on its missile without that aircraft taking a evasive action, is because we have some secrets in our equipment, in our under our kitty, with which we fight the war, and that is what wins you war. And I think people must understand whether, there are n number of mechanisms available in our country to find out whether the contract has been correctly done, whether the pricing has been done, whether public money has been misutilized. There are n number of agencies, and now that the CAG report is also tabled, I think I'm sure the Supreme Court will take some cognizance of various things that are available for them to go through this case, with whatever evidence that has been produced by whosoever has filed the petition in the court. So that activity should go on, but getting everything into public domain, to my mind, as a soldier, is absolutely incorrect. And I think, and I think Supreme Court will take cognizance of these facts. Whether that document is a stolen document, whether it forms an evidence in the court, and these things, I think there are other panelists who are expert on this. But getting this information into public domain, which is India-specific enhancement, specific weapons on that platform, and its cost, because cost of that weapon has got some implication in terms of how that weapon has been married onto the platform.
Yes.
So all these things, I think we should keep out
be
of,
sensitive.
and I request through your channel to all journalists, please don't get into this. Please don't get into this. Because I know for sure that whatever NRAM is put across in table form, that means he has access to some document. But those quoted price, I am sure, because we spoke of WikiLeaks. Americans had doctored those certain parameters that were put out.
Yes.
Okay, they had tweaked those parameters, they had tweaked that information. That's for sure, because they haven't given exact. Yes, the information through WikiLeaks, whatever has come out, that means there are leaks. So in this case also, the document has come out, I'm sure.
Yes.
But
I
to
just
quote everything in open domain, I would request everybody to just keep that part of it out.
To exercise restraint.
It is in actual interest of your national security. Choice is yours.
No, very well said, Air Vice Marshal Narokar. This is the reason why we wanted, a voice from the Air Force on this panel. I just want to point out, though, the document that has been made public, among others, is the finalizing report of the Indian Negotiating Team, or the INT, as per directions of the Honorable RM. I believe that would be the Raksha Mantri in this case. And it talks about factual inaccuracies and omissions, and many of the concerns of the RM and the INT, which have not been reflected in this document. Anup George Chaudhary, do you agree with the Air Marshal here, or do you agree with Kailash Vasudev? Where do you believe the line is at this point? Can the AG and the government argue national security against the Hindu and NRAM?
Well, I think I fully agree with Kailash Vasudev, as I've always agreed with him. And Geeta also spoke, she said absolutely in a correct perspective. The issue here is, what is exactly the Attorney General wanting to convey? And the stolen document theory, does it hold any water? That's the issue. Suddenly the documents have got a label of stolen only when today the matter is taken up before the court. This nobody knew it, the press didn't know it, the government did not give any press statement, no report has been lodged, at least it's not known whether any report has been lost. When was the fact that they discovered that the documents were stolen? From whose custody it was stolen? Where was it kept? All these facts are hidden. Just to say, I would say, very expansive statement being made, they are stolen. I think the entire effort was to somehow try to prejudice the court, the government's effort. Of course, the Attorney General is speaking on instructions, but the entire effort, it seems to me, is to ensure that by a short circuit this case is dismissed, and to try to prejudice the court to say, oh, they are very stolen documents, so you can't look at them. The Evidence Act, which deals with what evidence is permissible in law and admissible in law, makes no such distinction between a stolen evidence which is stolen or evidence which is not stolen. What does it reflect, those documents? How are you going to interpret those documents? Are they in consonance with the PIL mentioned? Are they in consonance with the stand taken by the government? Or if government's stand which was taken before the Supreme Court and these documents reveal that in fact that is not a correct stand to take, that makes a whole lot of difference. Now the government itself has filed an application for correction of a certain thing. They first got an order of the court by somehow conveying the impression that CAG report has already been tabled with the parliament. Now we all know that no such thing happened. And the government files an application for modification or clarification or correction of that judgment. That means government is also seeking review of that judgment. But to say that all this should not be taken into consideration because it is stolen is very, very far-fetched. And I don't think this argument of the Attorney General will hold water at all. And I believe one of the judges did remark that if they are stolen, do they become relevant or irrelevant? And then the other aspect is of Official Secrets Act. Like the law on sedition, this law made by the British was meant for subjects, and this is being applied to citizens. That's what I would say. The rulers made this to ensure to quell any revolt or quell any opposition. They ensured that this law comes into place. And their subjects would be doing what the bidding of the ruler.
Very well said. Very well said. With the Official Secrets Act were meant for subjects and not citizens. Right. One last point of view, Ghanshyam Tiwari of the Samajwadi Party. The question also remains of Parliament. The fact that the details that are now being discussed inside of court were not presented to Parliament and were not presented to the Parliamentary Committee either, because the government cited, like the Air Marshal told us, national security. So where is that line then, Ghanshyam Tiwari, between what is national security and what is public interest in terms of corruption? Go ahead.
Well, Faye, in the words of Samuel Johnson, patriotism is the last resort of a scoundrel. That is what is playing out in front of us. I don't think that's the same thing. That such crucial documents were stolen. Such crucial documents, I'll tell you why. Such crucial documents were stolen, was not told to the Parliament, was never told to the press, was not told to the court when the court was first hearing this matter, or did not come through CAG. So at every time there was an opportunity for this government to speak about this, they did not speak. It was only after a portion of these documents made to the Hindu and the case came up in the Supreme Court, the government said the documents are stolen. Now, if such crucial documents that are important, so important that the CAG report is redacted, it is so important that they would not be presented to PAC. It is so important that they are presented in a closed envelope to the Supreme Court and would not be given to the petitioner. How would they get stolen? And now that they have gotten stolen, the person who has stolen it would put it in public view because such a person is obviously not a patriot. So it is very clear that somebody stole it on purpose. And the government is completely, either it's not that the government is unaware, the government is fully aware and is unconcerned because somebody stole it on purpose. So this is the government that is hiding behind this one thing. Second, it's a government that does not say that what is being presented in the court is false. By the way, the government has used leaked stories in sections of media in the last 2 years. I can say as an opposition leader that used sections of leaked stories in section of media to present its case. So in certain cases, it can use classified secret documents leaked to sections of media to pursue opposition. And in other cases where a portion of document is in public domain, it can go to the court and say that the document is stolen. We are not so much bothered about it, but we are not ready to discuss it as a matter of evidence. I believe that this opens up an entirely new chapter in the Rafale deal, where a scam is unfolding that can lead to the Prime Minister, and it is important that what were the key aspects that were negotiated, who led the negotiations loose in favor of Dassault, and what are the aspects of those loose negotiations that harmed Indian interests, be it in terms of price, be it in terms of the guarantee, or be it in terms of other aspects of the deal, be it in terms of whether it had to be 36 versus 126, and so on.
Well, I just want to point out, just for information of the panel, Anup George brought it up, Anup George Chaudhary, when the Chief Justice asked the AG if these documents have been stolen, what has the government done about it? He said there's an investigation that is ongoing. We haven't filed an FIR. I'll find out and tell you, Your Lordship. That was actually the answer that was given. It was an answer that was like you're smirking. I believe that there were some smirks in the room as well at the time. But I do want to point this out, and I'm opening this up to the panel. Just gesture to me if you want to answer. Right now, as we speak, there are a couple of television channels, more than a couple actually, whose lead story tonight, proof of Balakot attacks, secret dossier of the Air Force has been accessed, secret dossier of the Air Force's proof is now available, and we can show you proof. Now, doesn't this also fall under that same accessing information that should be secret, that should be national security, of how the missile came in and how it hit? Is this a selective view of national security from the government to target the journalists that's making them uncomfortable? Yes. Mr. Chaudhary, go ahead.
It clearly demonstrates one thing. It clearly demonstrates the fact that when the government chooses to, it can leak documents whatever they are, but if it's to its advantage, then it's fine. If it is to its disadvantage, then of course you make it as the Official Secrets Act is made as a weapon to intimidate the press or the persons using these documents. Who, after all, we'll prosecute them, says very grandiosely, without lodging an FIR. The Attorney General says in a very grandiose fashion that we'll prosecute them.
We'll prosecute the
you have
journalists,
not
yes.
even lodged a report.
Yes.
First thing is to lodging an FIR. Investigation starts after lodging of an FIR.
Yes,
Since
Kailash
no
Vasdev,
report has
yes.
been lodged, what are you investigating?
What are you investigating? Yes, absolutely. And quite rightly, like pointed out by the Air Marshal as well, that the person who should be investigating is whoever's inside the Defence Ministry who allowed the document to be leaked or stolen to begin with. Kailash Vasdev, go ahead.
Anup, while agreeing with you as to the commencement of proceedings into an investigation is a FIR which has not been done so far. What intrigues one and what disturbs one as a citizen is, you've had this Rafale deal in court for the past 2 months, almost 2 months. In 2 months, this case has taken a swing from one direction to the other. Even aspersions have been cast on the court with regard to in the review petitions. Now, the disclosures which have come through the ministries are, should I say, controlled exposures for the purposes of supporting what the government has done. In the past many years, there have been innumerable disclosures, basically from the Ministry of Defence, because it is here that the private players come in. Private players means agents. If the agents are to come in and play in this area, to disclose your national secrets, whether it is the purchase of the Rafale, whether it is the purchase of the Westland helicopters, whether it is the purchase of guns, whether it is the purchase of equipment, whether it is the purchase of body bags. You know, there are thousands of instances in the past 20 years where the Defence Ministry has been exposed by its own people handing out information in the public domain for whatever considerations there may be. Not once in the past so many years has any action been taken to find out where the source of the leak is.
Yes.
WikiLeaks is a situation where leaks have been made available for the purposes of benefiting a group. That's a controversial area, let's leave it apart. But here, where the national interest is being hurt, the ministry is taking no actions to prosecute anybody. If anyone should be prosecuted by the utilization of the Official Secrets Act, it is the persons who are in charge of the ministries who are permitting this to happen. Make a list of the past 20 years, find out who were the officers dealing with these particular desks, bring them to the box and see what happens.
Well, I
You
have
are
a
not
quick-
going to do it
Yes.
because that is not convenient. There are too many players in this.
Yes, forgive me,
go
Mr.
ahead.
Vasudev. I have a quick
point.
question for Ms. Geeta
There are
Luthra.
too many players in this.
Yes, Ms. Geeta Luthra, the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court actually asked the centre today, when there is an allegation of corruption that is this serious, can the government take shelter under national security? Now, keeping in mind what the Air Marshal said to us earlier, do you agree that when it comes to corruption, details of how much we paid, why we paid, who ran the negotiation, and whether or not we followed the actual procedure that has been put in place, is that important in public, in the public space?
I think it's important, and I think it does not impinge on national security. Obviously, we are first citizens of this country, and for us, the national security issue is the utmost importance. But having said that, going into the aspect of how the deal is done, whether all the procedure is in place, is something which will not impinge on national security. That's one. I also want to say one thing. I want to echo what Mr. Chowdhury said. Both the Sedition Act and the Official Secret Act have been up for being repealed. And this demand has been made repeatedly, Law Commission, Administrative Reforms Commission, but there has been no repeal, even though the very purpose for which they were enacted is long over. I just want to add one line to what Mr. Vasudev said. There have been prosecutions, though very few in the recent past, but there have been several prosecutions under the Official Secret Act. And I question whether that, on the heels of the fact that there is now a Right to Information Act, whether that should not be repealed.
I saw Air Vice Marshal
That,
Narotkar
I
put his
think,
hand up.
is also
You'll have to be
important.
very, very quick, sir. I only have a few minutes to go, but please go ahead.
Yeah, I think what Luthra ma'am has misunderstood me is I was talking about certain details related to the performance and India-specific enhancement vis-a-vis the marrying up of the weapons and the platform. These are the details that should not come in the public domain. The remaining thing which which does not give out these specifics, which give you some indications of this contract, that should be left out, and remaining thing, and you have the entire report of CAG who has gone into the entire details of the contract.
Yes.
So I think one of the very important documents as far as I am concerned is the CAG report.
Yes. Well, absolutely, very well said. Now, we have completely run out of time,
Go
but
ahead,
we'll keep a
go
closer eye on it.
So we agree.
Ghanshyam Tiwari, forgive me, but we have run out of help. We have run out of time. It boils down to this. There were standard procedures in place, and the stories that have been written by various journalists point out to the fact that those standard procedures might not have been followed, and that information is available in great detail. The Air Marshal pointing out that specifics of the weaponry that has been added to the platform and married to the platform that is specific to India that would have impacted the price needs to be kept out of public domain for national security. Outside of that, the pricing, the cost, the standard procedures, who negotiated what and for how much, is in public interest. Now, for the government to go into Supreme Court today and argue that you shouldn't take these newspaper articles seriously because the Rafale files that we didn't give to Parliament, we didn't give to a parliamentary committee, we didn't give to the Supreme Court, other than in a closed envelope, was stolen. Our extremely secret, extremely classified files have been stolen from the Ministry of Defence. Is very, very worrying. For the government to suggest that they will use the Official Secrets Act, which our legal experts have pointed out was designed by the British for subjects and not in an independent India for citizens, the Official Secrets Acts to be used against journalists is very, very worrying for the fourth estate. At the end of the day, like the Supreme Court said today, can you take refuge in national security if the question is about corruption? And I suppose our Supreme Court will let us know. Thanks for watching.